Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the August 27th OpenCrowbar meeting. Not the 7th. I'm Rob Hirschfeld, and it's been a couple of weeks since we've had these calls. It's been even longer than that since I've been able to participate. So we're going to end up being very status-y and open for this, and then we'll see where it goes, and then hopefully we're going to start getting back into a regular cadence on these. The regular cadence would be that we talk about work and planning in this call, and then on the other week we actually talk about design topics and items that need to be addressed from a design perspective and where things are going. So it gives us a chance to sort of go deep technical on the off weeks, and then try and figure out what the priorities are in the project and moving things forward. And so with that in mind, I put together an agenda so we can sort of guide some of this conversation. Some of these are just hot items that I've talked about. I think the first thing on our agenda is most likely going to be review of issues in Git, because this is where we're going to talk about our burn down. Okay, so this is a bug I found in the UI around slash interfaces, which surfaced from an email thread that we had going on. Victor, do you know have you seen this also? You don't usually use the UI for this, do you?
No, I pretty much never use the UI. Okay, what exactly are you talking about? Cannot add interface.
And I don't have a demo system running. Basically, there's a
well, can you go
screen.
Can you just go into the bug? Does the bug say anything besides that?
It's crazy. I should have put a screenshot in it, but I don't think I did. Yeah, no, sorry. I may add a screenshot.
Yeah, because I have no idea what you're talking about there.
Let me see if I actually have a Crowbar dev server running. I might not. Nope, I don't. Sheesh. I'm going to launch one in the background. Just give me a moment.
Okay.
All right. So I'll come back to that. But basically, there's a screen that shows you the interface mappings per server, and then it stores it in an attribute. It's that network interfaces role, and that wasn't from the UI. It wasn't operating correctly. So it was tied into this bug that was found about the 10 gig interface patterns. There's a doc issue I think which might have been addressed. I think Scott was looking at that. This is just default behavior that we wanted to add. So when you create a network with the ready state, my assumption was that it would add that network into the deployment for you. Some behavior pieces as I'm using ready state more and more. This I think it would be done. We can decide this is done, and then that there are bugs against it, or we can fix the bugs and then take this as done. I'm okay with waiting until those bugs are fixed. I think this actually is done. Victor,
I haven't checked it.
This is a pull request that you accepted. So basically, this means that when you're on a snapshot, it shows you. It was that we had that discussion about, I call them milestones. When you accepted the milestones pull, it actually took this change. So I'm going to mark this complete because it was actually merged. How do I close it? Oh,
close this issue.
So half of these are ready state. We're going to talk about Icehouse upstreams, which I think we've been changing a little bit. I started on that and haven't finished it. This is actually, you've been making progress on the WSMan jig. I don't know what the end state is on that, Victor.
Go into that.
Yay. Look at that. I actually have a user story. Right. Server will have access to the network. We know that. It works. Server's out of band image. We did that.
No, we didn't. We did not, the no boot image and machine does not have to boot thing we did not do.
Okay. Oh, I see.
Yeah. Because that's not really relevant to adding support for OpenWSMan. That's a different feature entirely.
What is it configuring the server's what out of band? Oh, like this is the figures.
From what I assume when I read that is you're saying we don't use Sledgehammer anymore on systems that are using WSMan.
Yeah, I don't think that was the goal.
Okay.
So that's why I'm questioning how I wrote that story, because that's a whole another thing. To do it without a boot of Sledgehammer is not the goal.
Well, just for adding the WSMan jig, this is not that whole bullet point just isn't relevant to it.
Right.
Because the whole point was for the OpenWSMan for the WSMan jig, and well, it's the WSMan hammer now, is that we can talk to the server, we can control the server using WSMan. It doesn't say anything about actually being able to do anything with it. So I would zap that.
This whole line.
Yeah, because that's a different task.
Okay.
And the rest of that is done.
And then let me edit this to call it. Yeah, I can vouch that those things are done. Okay. So we need a new issue for the actual configuration. This configuration.
Yeah, but it won't be here.
That's right. It won't be in that story. So this is the in-band jig, which would
What
also
does that
be
even
necessary
mean?
for C-series. This is if you're going to do it without the WSMan. If you're going to do it through Sledgehammer.
Yeah, that's not a jig of its own, really, at this point.
Right. Okay, that's reasonable and useful. Yeah, because if we had somebody who's interested in the PowerEdge C gear, this is the way you'd have to do it using this approach. And this is the way we used to do it, so it's really a code migration.
There's more to it than that, but yeah.
I know. There's always more. Okay. Hadoop ready state has been moving very slowly. That's Mike, and it looks like Mike's on the call.
We started working on that. I've been doing doc stuff.
And the doc stuff is excellent, so I'm happy to see that. I don't think we're quite ready for the Hadoop ready state.
I can start working on it though. If you want to assign it to me. Cool. I don't think I'm actually listed in the project here.
Nope. There's a couple of people who should be listed in the project but aren't.
Okay.
Let me just add that to the list. Because we have Mike, we have Meshiat, Decoy. I like that. Okay.
Yeah, for me, you want to add lhrc-mikeyp is the GitHub login.
lhrc-mikeyp.
Got it.
And I talked to Isaac, and he does want to work on it more, and so does Alex. So it's just a matter of getting them. Isaac needs some Git. I need to teach him enough Git that he can fix those merges. I'm jumping ahead. Although, if I'm going to talk about it like this, I should actually create a story for him to work against. So what Isaac's been working against is convert UI page refreshes to Ajax, which I know I would like to see very much. Nodes one is one, the snapshots, the layer cake, and the annealer all use page refresh instead of just updating the individual items, and they really should be working within the items. Cool. So that'll give him something to commit against. And there's already pull requests outstanding for this. I'm not sure why they're failing Travis. So I've been traveling. I haven't had time to work with Isaac. We'll figure it out. I have some work that I have stashed that I want to bring back about the one outstanding bug too. Cool. So Mike, Victor, I know Judd's working on Chef Metal, which we don't have a specific story for. We probably need to start getting a Trello. Randy was investigating doing product management with Trello, and so what I might do if he has time, that's RP. Randy, if you're on the phone, I might ask you to actually do Trello, but also help ask people specifically for status. Do the Scrum Master role.
Okay. That's fine. But my only concern is, Rob, you and I are the only ones who have talked on that or responded in that Google group. And so if you and I are the only ones who are concerned with it, I would say we leave just using it through GitHub and leave it at that for now until we have enough people interested in moving over. If the tool being there doesn't mean it will be used.
That's true. Why don't we do this then as a start? I will get you in as in being able to manage these issues, and we can keep working through the issues list.
Okay.
But I'd like from that perspective then is let's actually burn down the issues list, get them assigned to the right people, and then we can actually start managing it.
Right.
I agree with you. It makes a lot of sense to do that. So let's get them in there, and then we can label get them labeled. And then
if people start saying this is very unwieldy, is there any other ways? Then we can bring this back up again.
I like it. I'm in favor of that. Okay. We could also move to shorter milestones, by the way. I haven't been willing to manage it, but if we switch to sprint by sprint milestones, Randy, that would give us a lot of the same features. So we'd know what was in this coming sprint, and we'd be able to start working at that perspective.
Well, how long is a sprint right now? A week, 2 weeks, a year?
Technically, it's 2 weeks. Although, and if we were going to start discussing using these planning calls to actually figure out 2 weeks of work, that would allow us to scope things down like we just did with Victor. Why don't we say 2 weeks? Because I think that would be longer than that, and it starts getting hard to manage. And if you want, you and I can coordinate offline, actually start building the sprints based on the Broom release, and then we'll start working those things through. And then
the other question I have is, at the end of sprints, do we have a work product to be done.
And say that again.
So the one thing that I've always really liked about the Agile process is you're supposed to have, at the end of each sprint, a shippable product. Are we at a state right now where at the end of each sprint we can say this is shippable?
Shy of having breaking bugs, yes. All the work that's been coming through, it has incremental pieces. The thing that we don't have right now is the full hardware life cycle, and we're working towards that. So
that's fine. As long as we have
shippable without the hardware profile, yeah.
That's fine. As long as we can qualify what the shippable is and what we changed between shippable Unit 1 and shippable Sprint 2, then that means we can show progress.
Right. Makes sense to me. So let's continue this as part of this email thread and start putting in some of these expectations and process, Randy. Is that all right?
That's fine. Yeah.
And does anybody on the call have concerns about continuing the dialogue on email and at least giving us some +1s on the dialogue? We need that commitment because we don't want to do it in a vacuum.
No, that sounds good to me.
Okay. Cool. Let's do that. All right. I like that because I think that's a good visible place to do it. So we have action. Okay. Yay. All right, so that's good. I'm watching the clock. Salt integration. So this hasn't surfaced through the lists yet, but I had some inquiries about doing salt integration, and I'm talking to the salt team. I think tomorrow, maybe this afternoon. This afternoon, I'm talking to him this afternoon to see about what actually building a bridge in with the salt pieces, so that we would basically set up a salt minion and tie it into the salt master as part of that process. So I know Greg and I have been talking about how that would work, and so I'll give you. I just want to warn you that it's coming. If people are interested in the salt integration, please let me know through the list. I'll send out an update after I've had the meeting and we have an initial design idea, and we'll send something out from the list so that people can comment on it and see what their interest level is. Okay, good. So that's salt. Victor, you want to talk about the hardware pieces? I know you have a pull pending that I'm trying to just make sure it does no harm in that. Do you want to talk about that briefly?
Unfortunately, I haven't done as much work as I'd planned on due to taking my family to the beach the week before last, and birthdays most of last week, and my air conditioning going out. So it's been a lot of fun. But I am at the point where I have started. I've ported over all of the. I've ported over at least the code for the Dell RAID and the Dell BIOS bar clamps, and enginized them and made them able to at least not break anything else inside of OpenCrowbar. All the recipes or the cookbooks for the recipes and the data bags. I have pull requests out there that make them all import properly. And right now I am working on the discovery pieces, and I had to make a detour to add some code that'll make it much easier to actually do discovery and picking what set of quirks to use for any given IPMI controller or RAID set or BIOS configuration for stuff in such a way that it won't result in a massive crazy spaghetti code. So that's been fun.
What does discovery mean from that perspective? Is that like the inventory piece of discovery?
Depends on exactly what you're talking about. For instance, for like IPMI and BIOS, discovery means figuring out who made it, what model it is, and figuring out how properly to talk to it. That's going to be the bulk of discovery. For configuration and inventorying, it depends. Inventorying is part of discovery. It really depends on whether or not there is going to be a consistent enough inventory method that we can do it during discovery instead of having it be its own role. And I'm not certain about that right now.
Okay. If you did it as its own role, we'd be able to add different roles, and which is probably necessary anyway. But
yeah, we'd be able to do it. We'd be able to. Well, we wouldn't necessarily have to add separate roles, but the inventory piece would be able to use the information found during discovery, including what the best way to talk to that particular controller is in order to do its work.
Wow. Would that change the role graph?
Ideally not. What it would change would be what information we're passing back and forth to the jigs to do their work. For instance, what I'm doing right now is I'm, just as a test of things, I'm abstracting out. Right now, everything for IPMI discovery and configuration is hard-coded to assume that we're talking to essentially something where the IPMI controller works perfectly. We don't need any special delays. We can do whatever we want to whatever users we feel like, and we don't have to, and everything falls out in the order of operations that we expect to. And we already know that doesn't work for Supermicro. So right now I'm abstracting that out so we can easily plug in other. We can easily, instead of turning our IPMI configure role into a bunch of spaghetti, we can set it up so that it just pulls in the libraries that it needs to do proper configuration.
It'll be interesting to review that on the design next week. Is that something we can talk through?
Yeah, I'll probably have, God willing, I'll have pull requests out there that demo how it all works. Okay. Hopefully I'll have demos out there that show how it all works.
I think that'll be really helpful because there's a lot of bits and pieces that have to come together to make all this stuff go. And so starting to explain it will help me be able to explain it to other people better. So I'm following what you're saying, but I think it'll be helpful for me to have some illustrations.
Yeah, I probably.
And I know I'm trying to build visualizations about this in the orchestration. So it might be worthwhile for you and I to find time to go through it. Especially once you have a pull request, I can look at it. Then I'll be able to ask questions, because this is the heart of the orchestration problem, in the physical orchestration problem. Okay. Actually, I'm going to note that.
And so what I'm trying to invent here is a way that we can account for whatever arbitrarily weird configuration or command sequences that hardware expects, and account for glitches that we find when we test a specific like a specific IPMI controller. There's specific IPMI controllers that may exhibit quirks that only appear at certain firmware revisions and BIOS issues that appear the same way, that sort of thing. And I know we're going to encounter them because we have encountered them in developing Crowbar 1. And I want a way that accounts for all of them in a way that accounts for all of them without generating a ton of spaghetti.
It makes sense. Let's use the knowledge we've got to improve this. And I know you from experience aren't going to over-architect it. It's just a question of knowing where the wedge points are that cause the systems to break.
Well, what I'm doing right now will probably look like over-architecting, but having written a quirk database in the past, yeah, I want to write something that we don't have to. I want to, and I think I've gotten to the point where we have something that will do just enough of what we need that we won't have to go and radically or tear it apart, a few revisions down the road.
Okay, let's after you've made some headway on it, or even while you're talking about it, let's chat on it, because I actually think that if I can re-articulate the quirk database to people and how we're solving the problem, it will help me explain the value there. Because right now, every other thing on the market assumes that they don't even deal with quirk, right? They choose to avoid the problem.
Most of what they do, like for IPMI in particular, they assume you have to sleep 5 seconds in between every command. And they don't try to account for controller-specific differences. Or most of them don't even try to account for controller-specific quirks. And kind of the same thing goes for WSMan and ILO stuff.
Okay. That makes sense. And some of it will be unavoidable, but some of it, if we can capture, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's a gem I've been working on called Structure Maps that basically incorporates the core of what I'm trying to do, which is we get a bunch of data back from OHI or some other discovery mechanism, and then once we get that data, we can run a bunch of matchers against it that will go in and pick the one that matches most closely and use it. So it can be kind of fuzzy, but still get reliable results.
Cool. I'm looking forward to seeing it. And then we'll try and articulate it tomorrow. If I can, I might try and draw a picture. But I've been working on what orchestration looks like picture. It's not been easy.
Well, this is what I'm doing right now. Is kind of it's something that's pretty down in the weeds if you're trying to do any sort of high level presentation.
I understand. It's amazing when I've been traveling the country. For those of you who aren't aware, I've been all over the country the last 6 weeks, talking to people about all sorts of things, including OpenCrowbar. And it's amazing how fast people come to the question of, well, I thought that RAID and BIOS was not a big deal. Don't people just rack servers and forget about it? And so it's important for me to be able to explain the quirks and how when somebody doing something as simple as a BIOS patch can actually cause a cascading system failure, which we know happens from experience, but most people don't touch it. Across 500
dealt
servers.
With the angry Fortune 100 servers. It dealt with the angry Fortune 100 companies.
So it's just what I want to be able to do is usually if I can pull it together in a picture, then people are like, "Oh, that looks scary." That makes sense, and so we make progress there. All right, we'll talk about this next week. It'll be the major topic. I think that probably is the right major topic, unless we can get further with Chef Metal in the meantime. OpenStack integrations.
Even Chef Metal, but all stuff's been pre-configured.
The Chef Metal, actually wrote a spec about this, and then had trouble actually making Chef Metal itself work against our Chef server. So basically, this is a pool. The strategy is to create a pool. I sent an email around. We should formalize that into a story. So one of the things, Randy, for us to do is to actually create the Chef Metal story. Randy had to drop off. Because I actually wrote up a nice, I thought it was nice, description of what would happen. Yeah, Chef Metal is really a poorly named project. It really is Chef Cluster. And it just uses a recipe to build a cluster, sort of like Crowbar 1 did, where you create a cluster. You say, I have this many machines with these roles on it. What it does is it makes the assumption that the Chef server can call out to a system and get back a machine that has an OS installed, Chef SSH key, Chef client installed on it, and no, just the SSH key. It installs the client itself. So you say, give me a machine that's installed and ready, and it gives and then Chef goes and does stuff on it. It's actually exactly what we described with ready state. So Chef Metal expects you to have access to ready state infrastructure, and so we can basically create a pool of servers that are available for Chef Metal. And then get allocated into that pool, and just use deployments as a way to manage that. It seemed I actually wrote about 50% of the required code on a flight. It's once Chef Metal itself is working, it's not based on what we've got. It's not a big deal. That's my assessment. But Judd's actually looking into it, because I sat down and couldn't get Chef Metal to work. It wasn't. I never got down to the Crowbar piece. OpenStack integration. So there's two paths here that I've been talking to people about. The first path is to do a Foreman integration, and I believe Dave was interested in that. Or do you take it? Oh, it's PackStack. And so I think the work that we're doing in SALT is going to be exactly the same work that we need to do for Foreman. So it's effectively using the script jig to link into the Foreman infrastructure that already exists. Potentially, we could use the script jig to build a Foreman infrastructure. And so ideally, this work, we'd have somebody in the community say, hey, we want to take this on or fund it. I'd be delighted to have somebody fund it. I know several companies who are interested in participating, and could conceivably even have multiple parties participate in the funding of it. I don't think it's a crazy amount of work. But SALT work will help investigate that. The SALT work, we actually have a specific person asking for it. And Dave, if you're listening and want to see this move forward, just contact me and we can talk more about that.
Yes and yes.
Okay, good. Then let's talk offline and see what we can do to kickstart this. I think I know at least one other candidate for it. The other approach is to take, and this is a longer shot. So SUSE's cookbooks are released for Icehouse. Unfortunately, they did a V1 integration. And if you haven't looked at what SUSE did, I think they call it SUSE Cloud 4. And so this is all Crow. Wow, nice picture. And a rainbow over the door. They have a really strong OpenStack deployment based on Crowbar 1. As excited as I am about that, I'm not particularly excited anymore about Crowbar 1 because I know the scale limitations. And so there's a hope and a potential a person in the community who wants to use Chef to do OpenStack deployments, but on CentOS. And actually, I think the mantra here is CentOS, CentOS, CentOS. Everybody wants to do it on CentOS. There's some people doing Ubuntu, but a lot of people are looking at the CentOS pieces. So if I would be happy to coordinate helping and also coordinate with SUSE their next steps on those cookbooks, whether they move them into the OpenStack community cookbooks or they continue to maintain those cookbooks as a community set of resources. And remember, they're actually in the Crowbar GitHub, the original Crowbar GitHub. Sorry. So it's OpenStack star is really the, not going to help anybody. It's not really a link. But their cookbooks are here. By design, those cookbooks could be ported to OpenCrowbar. It's not zero effort by any stretch, but we could port those over and take advantage of a lot of the features of OpenCrowbar. And up until June, those were being maintained. I think June or April. Those were being maintained on CentOS, so there was CentOS parity. That was June. So there are actually a lot of CentOS capabilities, and that's a full HA deployment, and it included Trove and Neutron and Solometer and Heat. I mean, it's really a sophisticated deployment. So I don't know. My preference, frankly, is actually to do the Foreman pieces right now because it aligns really well with our Ready State story. If SUSE wants to come in or somebody wants to help encourage SUSE to come over, that's another way to do it. And then the other way to do it is with the salt integration. This would be like the Foreman work. I don't have as much experience with salt. Okay, so that's an update for that. I think the time is right for us to go back to that. It's just a matter of resourcing. Chef Metal we talked about, and I'm going to run out of time. Mike, if you're still on, hold on a minute. And I have to go mobile and switch this to a voice. We talked about process management and planning. We talked about UI issues and AJAX polls, so we're pretty good. Actually, this is excellent. Mike, can I turn it over to you for a minute to talk about the documentation and what you want to do for next steps?
Okay, I can talk about that. So at a high level, what I did first is I have this kind of manual process. I check out the main Crowbar repository. I convert the markdown to restructured text, pass it through Sphinx, and I can publish docs. And that happens to work nicely with read the docs. So I actually have mirrored I have this process where I pull the main Crowbar repo, do the restructured text conversion, mostly automatically, and push it to a second repo that I can then trigger read the docs to do a build from. So that gives us online docs in basically HTML. You also get PDF and EPUBs kind of for free because it's all going through the same process. Issues outstanding there right now are some of the linking is a problem because there are hard-coded references in the Markdown to .mds. I need to figure out how to get that working and make the fix work in both Crowbar and read the docs. And the other issue is there are a lot of formatting problems in the existing Markdown. So what I'm doing generally is fixing the Markdown so that it converts cleanly, which means we get fixed on both the Crowbar and the read the doc side. So that's short term, and I'm just going to do that probably manually for a month or so. On the Crowbar side, I need to look at how we get the actual documentation within the Crowbar repo converted to restructured text. That's the easy part. The hard part is going to be rendering the restructured text in the Crowbar UI dynamically because there are no libraries in Ruby. So There are libraries, but they kind of wrap around the command line utility that does the conversion.
Okay.
So what I may end up doing, I have to prototype it, is see if I can actually get Crowbar to just call into Sphinx directly and rebuild the docs when they change. So the first time around, we do almost a 5-minute doc build to do the conversion when we first do an install. And then from that point on, the docs will just render because they'll be converted to HTML in advance. In a developer mode, we can fire off a make.
So actually, it might be a reasonable thing to not try to render the docs like we are doing.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of maintaining all that code, just point people to the internet for the docs, keep the docs where they are. And then if you're a developer or you need access to the docs, the restructured text is actually very usable if you're reading it on a screen.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm interested to hear other people's position on just stripping out the docs piece and using what you've built as sort of the docs site.
Mm-hmm. That's a possibility too. Since the docs site is pure HTML, we could render that locally and have a copy of it local to the Crowbar server and still have the link to the online docs.
I don't know that we need to render it locally.
Could be.
I know Victor hates the process because it's slow.
Yeah.
And you know it's not the latest, and if people fix bugs, you don't get the latest bugs. It's still checked out so that we actually have. I don't want to give up the code control for it, but I've really come. I'm not sure we need to render it in the app the way we are. As much time as I've spent writing that code,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's just crap, and we shouldn't bother. That what you've done is actually a much cleaner, more searchable documentation inventory. The biggest concern I have is that now we have to have a system that actually updates it and renders it. But Travis could do that. If it's a simple set of commands, Travis could easily do that for us.
Yeah. Travis can do it. We could actually put in a post commit hook to trigger read the docs if the original sources are in the master Crowbar repository. So that's an option. And as I said, we always have the option if we wanted to. We could render the docs locally with no extra effort. I mean, it's literally a makefile, so there wouldn't be a lot of code there.
The one thing that we would give up is and the reason I did all this was so that we could composite the docs from multiple workloads. Yeah, and that's one of the things that originally we did with all these bar clamps is we needed to have each bar clamp had its own component of the docs, and now that we've simplified and streamlined, I'm not sure that that's as big a need anymore. Yeah, it's a good point though. We're losing that capability, so it might be possible to do that anyhow. I haven't really looked into it. Maybe an alternative approach to that is just make it easy for the various plugins and bar clamps to generate docs if we give them the right framework. Right. Well, but then they'd be standalone docs. I don't know. It doesn't feel like we are patching all those pieces together as much as we used to, and that the workloads will have their own. Maybe it's fine to have standalone docs for the workloads. Good point, though. That I'm carrying use cases in that maybe we don't have to worry about, right? Ready state means Crowbar has its own docs. If you bring in a workload, it's its own doc. It'd be its own independent supplement. Yeah, because when we pull in things like the Hadoop infrastructure, there will be documentation there. Some of the bigger workloads are definitely going to involve extra documentation. I would hope they do, but does the documentation need to be integrated into it to create a single thing? That's the question. And like the hardware stuff might end up being integrated in as but we want to be able to run without the hardware loads, which is why it's designed like that. Victor, do you have a thought? Are you still following this? Yeah. Mike, I'm very tempted to take all that complexity out of the product.
Yeah, because my tendency, what I was leaning towards doing is once I had the conversion working, I was literally going to do one massive check-in to convert all the docs to restructured text. Do the automated conversion, which is 90% of the way there. And I was considering having the docs URL just point to a local directory that had the HTML rendered in it already.
Mm-hmm.
And that way we would end up moving all that. We'd end up removing most of that code from the Crowbar server and probably replacing it with a route. So it might be possible to keep the local copy, but with minimal effort, but if we lost it and just pointed to read the docs, I don't think we'd lose anything. I would tend to agree with you.
Let's do that. We always can, if we need to put the code back in, we can put the code back in, but I think everybody agrees restructured text is more expressive, that keeping up with rendering that code has decreasing value to stuffing it in the database.
Yeah.
And we're not, there's a whole bunch of things I wanted to do that I'm not sure is relevant, right? I wanted to be able to have, links from individual screens to the docs. We haven't gotten there. And the code's still going to be so.
And we can still potentially do links from individual docs to the individual screens to the docs, except that it'd be an external hyperlink. What I see as the big barrier is today it's been kind of hard to read the documentation until you had Crowbar installed, so it's a chicken and egg problem. At least with the documentation hosted externally, it's possible to read it before you start the install process.
I strongly agree with that. That makes a lot of sense.
Well, it's less work for me.
Let's go ahead and do that.
Okay, it's less work for me, so trust me, it's a lot easier to do that.
I don't want to create any side effect work that is anticipating a feature that I'm not sure that we need anymore. One thing that would be interesting is it possible to throw metadata into those files, like a GUID or some type of ID number that we could track? I was just thinking a date-based GUID, something simple enough to find a document if we wanted to cross-reference them.
I think that's possible.
Okay. Don't spend. Actually, you know what? That's over engineering. Let's not do
yes
that yet.
And no. I mean, the way the docs render when you're using Sphinx, it's going to create anchors within the HTML for most sections and subsections in the docs. So you can always link to a tag somewhere within the documentation pretty easily. And there is an indexing feature which I'm not using because we haven't been able to put index tags in the markdown. But if we actually convert our format to restructured text, we also get indexes.
All right. I've pushed back on this way too long. Let's switch it. Let's pull out the code that renders it and just point people to the website. I'm delighted by the work you've done. It's
okay, good.
It's going to help everybody quite a bit.
So I'll generally follow that path. I don't think it's going to be a big project. It's just going to be a little bit of time to do the conversion and see how clean it ends up being.
Okay. I'm sorry I pushed back on this at all. This is the right path. Very excited. Cool. So I'll kick off something that I'll move to the mailing list as our final topic. Just I've been hearing people complain about Cobbler, and in talking to people, Cobbler's clearly the alternate choice that people seem to have for
the default in doing these provisioning deployments. And while I don't think it competes with us from a feature perspective, definitely once somebody's using Cobbler, the interest in Crowbar declines. And so I want to start pulling together a Crowbar versus Cobbler sort of fact sheet and do some research, and I'll pass that through the mailing list. Hopefully, get some contributions on it. I've been hearing a bit of complaints about Cobbler. Nobody seems very happy with it. Razor is in a weird state. The old Razor founders are now doing something called Hanlon, which is a fork of Razor from way back. And it looks like, Razor's very aligned with Puppet. Hanlon looks like it might align with Chef. I'm trying to talk to the Salt guys and see if they're looking for something. But it might surface a set of use cases for Crowbar to be streamlined replacement for Cobbler without, and we might have to look at limiting some of the complexity from that perspective to actually be a Cobbler replacement. I'm just experimenting with it, so I'll pass that through the mailing list and see if we can start a dialogue about it and a feature set comparison. Anything else?
No, not for me.
Okay. I think this was good. We covered a lot of ground today. All right, everybody. I will talk to you next Wednesday, if not sooner. Thanks.
Bye.